Well, hi everybody. So today, last night I've done a bit of reading up and checking on the old interweb to find out as much information as I can. Although I'm sure that this little presentation is probably only scratching the surface. But anyway, here goes. Here goes. These are some of my thoughts and some of the bits from articles that I've managed to get hold of. And apologies if you know a lot of this stuff already. But we obviously know that the Teresa Halbach homicide in history, and to the people in Wisconsin, by Steve's conviction for that homicide, Ken Kratz had proved that far from being worthy of a big payout for the 1985 wrongful conviction, he had proved that Steve had spent those 18 years wrongfully convicted harboring his desire for murder, desires that obviously also lurked inside his young nephew's mind, which is quite interesting, isn't it? Because we wonder which young nephew harbors desires for murder. Ken Kratz once famously said that I didn't just prove him guilty beyond reasonable doubt. I proved him guilty beyond all doubt. And of course, that was back in 2007. What Ken Kratz didn't realize, though, is what an effect that case would have on his career. During his professional ethics case in June of 2012, Kratz called a paralegal and a victim witness coordinator who worked under him at the Calumet County Prosecutor's Office that employed 7 people. They both described Kratz as a good boss, team-orientated and inclusive, and particularly sensitive and tender in dealing with crime victims. I suspect they all enjoyed, or a lot of them enjoyed, Ken Kratz's unique personal touch. There's something sinister about the particularly sensitive and tender in dealing with his crime victims. But then, that's just speculation on my behalf. One of his work colleagues, Michelle Moyne, said the Avery trial seemed like a high point for Ken Kratz. And afterwards, he sort of mentally checked out from the job. Now, at this hearing, Ken, who was 51 at the time, began the morning's hearings by pleading no contest to 6 counts of professional misconduct relating to the texts and comments he made to women in 2009. As we all know, the incident came to light in the autumn of 2010 when the Associated Press reported that Kratz had tried to start a sexual relationship with a 25-year-old woman who was the victim in a domestic violence case that he was prosecuting. And of course, he basically threatened that he would not prosecute the ex-boyfriend unless she was willing to help him with his various fantasies. Of course, the case quickly earned national attention, and partly because, of course, Kratz was the elected district attorney of Calumet County, but he was also the chair of the state's Crime Victims' Rights Board and had played a key role in the passage of the state's victims' rights law. He also had earned statewide attention for prosecuting Stephen Avery in 2007 for the murder of Teresa Holbach. Patty Seeger, who was the executive director of the Wisconsin Coalition Against Domestic Violence, said that the hearing was a long time coming and that it appeared for months as if Ken would not be held professionally accountable. She pointed out that, in effect, Ken was sworn to protect the vulnerable. Seeger said in a prepared statement, instead, he caused victims in Calumet County and beyond to question their faith in the justice system. Well, Patty, I think we can safely say that things haven't changed. Some of this I got from various, as I say, articles. If you go onto Wikipedia, Ken Kratz, you'll find references at the bottom. I won't leave you the links because you know how to do all that kind of stuff. Anyway, carrying on. There's something else that was in the article. Kratz recounted his work as a leading victims' rights advocate in Wisconsin, how he volunteered hundreds of hours to work with the state board and still has the pen former Governor Tommy Thompson used to sign the state's current victims' rights law in 1997. I can't help thinking that I've learnt, or I've heard of people who use various ways to try and meet certain types of women. There's some great ways of meeting the women that you would quite like to have an affair with, Ken. For example, at work, we know that your friend Len Kaczynski has got a particular talent for attracting the opposite sex by making his cat noises. Another place where you can meet ladies is obviously in the shopping centres, or as you call them, the shopping malls, even in church. But I can't help thinking that to volunteer hours in this board, in volunteer hundreds of hours to work with the state board, I can't help wondering, was that in order to furnish your predatory ambitions? The reason I suspect that is because Jerry Buting, who of course has a great reputation, believes that there are at least 15 victims out there. Now, of course, the other thing we notice is that many district attorneys, they progress their career by becoming judges. Brad Schimmel has just become a judge. We know that Len Kaczynski became a judge. We know that Mark Roher became a judge. Or they pursue political careers. And we know that by 2008, Ken was actually exploring a bid for Congress. But of course, any hopes for that future success was sent crashing down following the sexting scandal. Now, this is just pure speculation, but I've also heard from a fairly reliable source that a certain Mr. Mike Griesbach, this is what I've heard, was also known to have a little bit of flirt with the opposite sex, and apparently, I'm just, as I say, don't shoot me down for this. I'm just repeating what I've heard. I once offered a certain lady a date to the Manitowoc courthouse, where they could have a bit of fun on the judge's table and bench. As I say, that's something that you that you come across, something that you hear. Anyway, I don't know if it's true or not. So just putting it out there. As I say, any hopes that Ken had were sent crashing. Again, if we go back to the hearing, this is what Ken Kratz told the professional ethics people and the public. He told them how he has come to terms with the sex addiction problem that led to his resignation, divorce, bankruptcy, and national humiliation. But then went on to say, I've never been happier in my life than now. I no longer live in shame or isolation and a double life. He said that he's far ahead of the day in 2010 when he had a gun in his mouth. He said, I've gotten one thing back, my self-respect. That's a pretty good place to start. Then, of course, disaster strikes. They get to hear about a documentary coming out. So they try and prevent the release of Making a Murderer. They took out a subpoena against the filmmakers. In it, he was alleging that the filmmakers were acting as an investigative arm for the defense. So the filmmakers brought a motion to quash the subpoena and refuted Kratz's accusations as baseless. Now, apparently, Kratz was claiming that the filmmakers might have evidence that related back to Teresa's case. Of course, the filmmakers told that, we are not trying to investigate the Holbach case, and tried to avoid any discussion about it. One of the things that Kratz, I believe it was through Mark Wiegert, they demanded all the phone calls with Stephen Avery. But of course, Stephen Avery is being held in a state prison. All of the phone calls are recorded anyway. Now, here's one of the messages that I got from Ken Kratz, which as yet I haven't read out. So here goes. He wrote to me just on Monday or Tuesday, I'm not sure how you may have gotten the impression that I'm unreasonable or not willing to answer questions. He wrote, I'm usually held up in blogs like this to ridicule. For example, see how easy it is to read the snarky or abusive questions people will pose. You can pretend they aren't meant to be personally denigrating when you simply read what others write. But you will be choosing to present your otherwise legitimate case inquiry clouded by the quips about my band. Remember, he was in a band called Alibi with Brad Schimmel, or his wife, or his personal struggles. Please try to imagine dealing with that hate every day. Here's the thing, Ken, and I'm sorry for keep going on about this. In 3.5 years, you have failed miserably to untwist what you claim was twisted by making a murderer. You've even admitted that the press conference, the March 2nd press conference, was not a good idea, and that you would have done things differently. In that respect, just like Robert Herman, who has also pointed out that he would not have had his officers involved in the investigation on the Avery property due to the conflict of interest. And that's a good start, Ken, but you need to go a lot further. And there are out there, throughout the world, there are millions of supporters of Steve, some who are maybe not as charitable and do harbour a certain animosity towards you. I don't hate you. I don't hate Robert Herman. I don't hate Mark Wiegert or Tom Fassbender or Brad Schimmel. For one thing, I've never met any of those people. The ones that I've met through Making a Murderer, the supporters of Stephen Brendan, as I say, we're a huge cross-section of society, come from all parts of the political spectrum. You can rest assured of that. But as I say, amongst us, there are some pragmatists. We can see that as far as law enforcement in Wisconsin was concerned, the end justified the means. And I would go so far as to say, and maybe ask people out there, given what we know about the case, if you were in, say, Andy Coleman's position or Jim Lenk's position, or even if we were, dare I say it, in Ken Kratz's position, having been asked to take over this case, given the pressures to pin it on Steve, would we have acted differently? Could we have? I don't know. I honestly don't know. If you're working in the Manitowoc Sheriff's Department and the walls of Jericho are just about to start crumbling down, given the pressures that people will put under, I'm not so sure. And certainly for Kratz, for Ken, the world was going to be your oyster once you had secured Stephen's conviction. Brendan, that was just collateral damage as far as Ken was concerned. Ken, the state of Wisconsin and yourself, you're in a hole. One of the first rules when you're in a hole is to stop digging. Or, as I would prefer to say, let go of that ever-rising balloon. The facts in this case speak for themselves. This case is heading in one direction. And I think, unfortunately for you, Ken, yeah, you are the scapegoat in this case. You have been made the scapegoat in this case. But did you personally murder Teresa? I don't think so. So why should you be made the scapegoat any further? In my conversations with Herman and Wiegert, they're both supportive of you. But one wonders if other people further up the food chain, now that you are nothing at all to do with Calumet District Attorney, you're just an individual, whether they will look to make you even more of a scapegoat than you already are. It's something that I pointed out to Robert Herman, a friend of mine that was found guilty of some serious assault charges. The fact that this ex-policeman had saved a woman's life from drowning in a freezing cold river. It had no beneficial effect whatsoever. As I said to Robert, do you really want to be the scapegoat for what's about to unfold? Like I said, first rule of holes: when you're in one, stop digging. As I said to Robert in a very, very early text message to him, email to him, he could go from 0 to hero very quickly by helping to uncover the corruption within his department. Unfortunately, it would appear as if a lot of people out there are simply wanting to bury their heads in the sand. The way that this case has developed since Making a Murderer's first release, Kathleen Zellner is only progressing, making more and more discoveries. Really, truthfully, Ken, think about it. Think about it. How far are others involved in the corruption going to look after you? Anyway, that's all I've got time for today. We'll see you again soon. Bye for now.